Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the FFF Show, Faith and Family First, where Jim Hochberg and I are going to talk about amending a state constitution. And we have to remember that amending a state constitution, it isn't just about updating legal text. It's also about shaping the future for generations to come. And it's a decision that demands thoughtful reflection grounded in our shared principles and beliefs. So, in today's episode, Jim and I are going to delve deep into the heart of constitutional reform, exploring the intersection of faith, family, and civic duty. We'll examine the merits of amendment, considering the implications for our community and the values we hold dear. So, let's chat about that. Welcome to the show, Jim.
How's it going, Eva?
Very, very good. So you and I, over the course of this legislative session, we've been talking about the different ways that somebody could amend a constitution, right? I mean, we're talking about the state constitution today, but I think that in the wider scheme of things, we've got to talk about when a constitution should be amended, and if it should be amended, how should it be doing? How should it be amended? I mean, these are the kind of things I think that we need to talk about because we need to gear up for the upcoming elections. And here in Hawaii, it looks like there's going to be about a handful of constitutional amendment questions that's going to be put forward to the voters of Hawaii. So we want to make sure that as they're going into that voting booth, or if they're looking at their ballots at home and they see these constitutional amendment questions, we want to start giving them some things to think about on why, if, or if not, the Constitution should be amended. So let's start with your thoughts, because I know that you have a lot of thoughts on amending the state constitution.
Well, let's talk about the federal constitution first, because we need to understand the difference, if that's okay.
No, that's great.
So, when the Declaration of Independence was issued in 1776, the state of national politics in Europe were monarchies. And the king has all the power. And his friends have some power that he gives them. And the people that he doesn't like can be thrown in jail. And people who don't like him who say things can be thrown in jail. And so when the founding fathers announced the creation of the United States of America in the Declaration of Independence in 1776, they went from monarchy and peasantry and no rights really much at all for the population to throwing off the shackles of monarchy, in particular the King of England. And they had this thing called Articles of Confederation, which they were very wary, concerned about, didn't want to have a repeat of this very authoritative federal officer, the king, in America. And so the Articles of Confederation basically said, we don't really have a federal government. We are cooperating in a confederacy together. And they were fighting amongst themselves, state to state, for economic advantage, religious advantage, different things. And it didn't really work very well. And that's why in 1780s, the Continental Congress got together and said, we got to change the Articles of Confederation. And the whole Federalist versus Anti-Federalist dialogue between Jefferson and Madison and Adams and those guys, and if people want to read what they said, the books are available. The whole discussion was, to what extent is the new United States of America going to have a federal government? What's the extent of authority, subject matter wise, And how is it going to be organized structurally as a body to exercise those authorities? And the Federalists wanted a strong federal government. The Anti-Federalists wanted a weak federal government. And so the way they crafted the Constitution in the end, it's a document that tells what the three branches of government are and what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And anything that they're not empowered with within those descriptions are supposed to be off limits for the federal government. Any student of the Constitution that looks at it today will recognize that since probably Woodrow Wilson, the strength of the federal Constitution has been intermittently attacked by progressives who don't like strong federal government and don't like or actually prefer to have a stronger federal government, because the other thing that happened in the Constitution was the Bill of Rights. So the Constitution said you're going to have judiciary, executive, and legislative branches, and here's how you get elected, and this is what your jobs are, and you can't do these things. And then the first 10 amendments said, and you can't do these things to the citizens, and whatever we haven't mentioned in here remains the ownership in either the states or the people. And over the last 100 years, that's gone to heck. But anyway, that's the federal Constitution. It has two ways to amend it, one by Congress, and then we vote on it, and one by is the Convention of States, which you and I did a whole show on, and then the people vote on that. That's different. It's referred to as a Constitution of negative authority because it's saying what the federal government can't really much do. The state constitution, on the other hand, has certain things it has to have in it to become a state because of what's in the federal constitution, but it's not as much a constitution of limited authority as of setting up what the people in the state want the constitutional authority of their state government to be, because of the 10th Amendment, which says everything that's not addressed in the federal Constitution is in the power of the state governments or the people themselves. So you would not expect to see in the US Constitution a lot of the things that we have in state constitutions. But the question that you're asking, when to amend, when not to amend, it's really a political tug of war. And we know that from the 1998 same-sex marriage amendment. That was a huge tug of war. And you were actively involved with us. Why don't you explain what that tug of war was?
Yeah, so in the state of Hawaii, to amend the Constitution, what has to happen in a regular process is that the question has to move through the legislative process. So they come up with the question, and then it's argued between the House and the Senate, on the language that this question is going to have, and then at the end they both vote on the question, and then if it passes, then that question that was voted on by the legislature is the question that ends up on the ballot. And so back in 19...
And the reason it's a question is because why?
Because we're asking the people who live in the state of Hawaii, should the Constitution be amended as follows? And then they will put the question in on, and to give the example, we'll talk about the same-sex marriage issue, because what happened in 1998 is the question that was put, first of all, you and I talked about, not just us, there were many people at the time that were talking about how convoluted the stupid question was. Rather than them just asking a question straight out, should, same-sex couples be allowed to marry, right? That would have been a very easy question.
And people would have voted yes or no, and it would have passed or not.
And it would have been very clear, right? What they did is they gave the power to define marriage to the legislature. And so the way the question was worded was, shall the Constitution be amended to allow the legislature to define marriage to opposite sex couples?
And the reason that happened was because of the judge's order in the same-sex marriage litigation, he ruled that reserving marriage to opposite-sex couples violated the constitutional rights of same-sex couples. That was his ruling. And so, in order to attack the ruling, they chose to only ask if it's true what the judge said. Does the legislature have the right to say marriage is only for opposite sex couples? So they didn't want us voting on what marriage is. Most of the states back in the 90s and the 2000s that had constitutional amendments on what marriage is, they actually voted on marriage is a union of one man and one woman.
And I remember at the time that our current President Biden had made statements that marriage should only be between a man and a woman. Barack Obama, who was a senator at the time, said that marriage should be defined between a man and a woman. So you're right, it was overwhelming back then, regardless of political party, that marriage was viewed as this contract that was made between one man and one woman, and that's what was understood. So the question was so confusing that Hawaii Family Forum was one of the first organizations, and there were others, that put money into education in the community to get them to understand that voting yes meant that you were against same-sex marriage, and voting no meant that you were for it. Because when you read the question, you're kind of, your body wants to say yes to same-sex marriage or no to same-sex marriage. Your mind is not trying to wrap around whose power you're trying to give through the Constitution. And so we did this massive campaign. And as you well remember, the people that voted very clearly that yes won. And there were hardly any no blank votes, because as you know, here in Hawaii, the blank votes are considered on constitutional questions as a no vote. So we did our job and the education was there. But so the Constitution was amended back in 98 to allow the legislature to reserve marriage to opposite sex couples. That's what
that was responding directly to the court's order instead of letting us control our own life. So why did we get that question from the legislature? Because of who the legislators were that worked on the bill. And why do we have those legislators? Because people voted for them. And so what's the solution to the problem, Eva?
Like we say, and we must talk about this in every single show, Jim reminds us that our vote, when we show up during an election year, our vote is going to help effectuate what's going to happen at the Capitol. Whatever that person that you're saying yes to, that senator that you're saying yes to, that representative that you're saying yes to, is going to take your vote into the big building that belongs to us, and they are going to move their agenda forward. The question is, what agenda are they moving forward? And what's interesting is the agenda of legislators should be the agenda of the people, because they're there to work for us. But that is not what is happening, in the current makeup of the legislature, right? You've got legislators who are using their own cause to move things forward. And not to say that a legislator doesn't have a right to have a position on something, but when you say yes to that position, when you use that position to only move forward your agenda, then something is really, really wrong. Now, using that same-sex marriage constitutional amendment question as an example, you fast forward to today, and in this legislature this year, they want to amend the Constitution again on that question, because our Constitution says that the legislature shall have the right to reserve marriage to opposite sex couples. And there are a lot of people in the legislature now that don't like that. They don't like that that it kind of looks on the surface like we're saying that they can only say that marriage is between one man and one woman. But why don't you explain how that's not really the case, and why this new move to amend the Constitution again to codify same-sex marriage
So,
isn't really
so
necessary.
when I asked the question, what was the reason that there was this tension uh, in the community? And the answer to the question is because our community is kind of split between political philosophy of traditional life in America and the opposite of the traditional life, which is often referred to as progressive. They want liberty for everything and no traditional values at all. It was happening in 1998. It's been happening ever since, and it's getting increasingly worse in our little state to the point where uh, the the thing about amending the Constitution is it's very hard to change it because you have to amend it again. The only time I remember that something was put in a constitutional amendment and passed and then repealed by constitutional amendment was the drinking of alcohol in the United States in the US Constitution, because it was unconstitutional to sell alcohol, or the Constitution prohibited the sale of alcohol, and then the Constitution was amended to take that out to permit the sale of it. It's very hard. So what I want us to think of when we're looking at constitutional amendment proposals is, do I think this is something that should be hard to change? Or should it be something that only the legislature should be in charge of so it's easy to change? All we have to do is change legislators to get it different.
Well, and I have,
And that's really important because in Hawaii, we often vote yes on constitutional amendments. And you and I have done shows before where I give you I'm voting no unless you can convince me I should vote yes. And I wish we would have that approach, because it seems like without thinking a whole lot about it, most people just vote yes. Because when you read the questions in the ballot, it's really hard to even understand what they're asking.
well, I was going to say here in Hawaii, and anybody can test me on this, anytime there's constitutional amendment questions, they're not always easy to understand. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are. Another constitutional amendment question that's moving this legislative session is on whether the justices in the state of Hawaii, whether their retirement age should be, increased from 70 to 75. Very simple question. Should, the age of retirement be, changed from 70 to 75? Easy, right? So, I mean, somebody reading that could say, yeah, I do think that it shouldn't be about an age. Some people might say it's about whether the person can do the job, right? And so, of course, we should allow them to work up to 75.
So the real question is, why was that ever put in the Constitution? That doesn't belong in the Constitution. The age of retirement for judges is not a constitutional issue. It's a statutory issue. But we have things in our Constitution, because we vote yes all the time, that we really shouldn't have, because, for instance, this gender stuff they want to put in the Constitution, the changing genders and all that. As we go down this new path and we find that it's psychologically harmful, or it's medically harmful, or there's other reasons why it was a mistake to want to do it, if it's a constitutional right, it has to be voted on by the people at 2/3 of the voters to change it again. And we should say to ourselves, that doesn't seem like something we should put in the Constitution. Of course, the proponents are, oh, well, you have to put this in the Constitution because it's a right. And we don't want people taking it away. But we've got to go back to the beginning. What did the Declaration of Independence say our rights came from? The Creator. Those are rights. The dignity of the human person. Transgender stuff, smoking marijuana, the age of retirement, whether you're going to have public employee unions, all that stuff is not constitutional fodder. It should be statutory, and the legislature then is responsible for it, because that's the other trick. once they get us to vote for it, it's not their fault.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that in Hawaii, a lot of people leave it blank when they don't understand the question. Now, the blanks end up being translated as no vote. So sometimes that works, to the benefit of the situation. And they were going to try to get rid of that this year, but that bill didn't move forward. But go back to the same-sex marriage question though. Why are we now having to amend the Constitution again about this issue when, to me, I'm not an attorney, but when I read it, it says that the legislature shall have the right to reserve marriage. It doesn't say that they have to, right?
Well,
So,
and they already didn't,
right,
because they legislatively passed same-sex marriage in 2013 under Abercrombie.
right. So this question is going to,
It's a power struggle.
okay, so this,
The proponents of same-sex marriage want to put it in the Constitution in a different way so that it can't be changed. Right now, it can be changed. The legislature can change it. And maybe the proponents of same-sex marriage want polyamory marriage. Maybe they want human animal marriage. Maybe they want furniture human marriage. And so they're maybe going to have something in the Constitution that allows marriage to be anything. Doesn't belong in the Constitution.
okay, so this question is going to be put forward to the people. Should the bill pass, and it looks like it's going to pass, then the question that's going to be on the ballot is, I don't have it right before me, but basically it's going to make it very clear that marriage is legal even between two same-sex individuals, which kind of is weird to me because we already have a federal law. But actually, that's why we're having this discussion. We're having this discussion because there are some people in the legislature that's worried that the same thing could happen to marriage that happened to Roe, right? Because they overturned Roe and it went back to the states. They're worried that should marriage be overturned for some reason, say Trump is elected and whatever reason, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not sure in my own knowledge or experience that they have enough people in the United States House of Representatives or the United States Senate that would actually do that. And I'm not sure where the justices would be on that issue. But we know we're having this question because there was one of the Supreme Court justices actually had put that in one of their statements, right? So,
Well, so the thing is, for folks that raise their family and they work and they take care of their friends and their churches and stuff, and politics isn't that hot of an item for them, they probably don't realize that the people who run the state, politics is almost everything.
mm,
They probably still like their families. They probably still like their friends. They may even go to church and they may like their churches, but the power of politics, and it's a chess game. So you're always trying to look 5, 6, 7, 8 moves down to get to where you want us to change to again, which is why I'm leaving. And they, so people need to realize that none of this stuff is reactionary by the people that run our state. They plan it out, moves in advance, step by step for 20, 30, 40 years. And our side, unfortunately, doesn't pay that much attention because we're busy doing the other traditional things. And we end up being reactionary to something that we have to deal with. Either it's a hearing on a bad bill or it's choosing how to vote on a constitutional amendment. And I wish there was a way for the teams to be equally interested and in shape for the fight. We lose the fight all the time because our side isn't that interested until something strikes them as terrible. The other side is doing it inch by inch, day by day, month by month, hour by hour. And it's a hard battle to win if our side's busy and plays whack-a-mole every once in a while.
so for those viewers and listeners, I'm going to have Jim back even when Jim departs these beautiful islands of Hawaii. I'm going to have him back on the show once the questions that are going to be put for to us during an election is they're actually printed so that we can see what those questions are. And then we'll have Jim and maybe even some other local attorneys just come on and be on the show to talk about the questions and what it means for our Constitution. And then hopefully, as you're listening to this and you're watching this, you're going to say, you know what? This is really important information that we've got to get out during an election year, because it's really, really important that our legislators start to understand that what they're doing in that big Capitol building is supposed to be the will of the people. And so the will of the people, when a constitutional amendment question is put before them, the will of the people needs to be made known. We don't like it that the questions come out sometimes confusing. We don't like it that sometimes there are issues, as Jim mentioned, that he doesn't feel even belong in the Constitution, but we are where we're at. And these kind of things are going to keep coming out of our state capitol. And so we have to get to the point where we're accepting that we have a responsibility moving forward, and no more sitting on our hands or posing a tempting target for the devil by sticking our head in the sand. I mean, there is a
And
responsibility.
let me add something too, if I have a minute. Do we still have a
Oh,
minute?
yeah, yeah. We have a couple more minutes. Yes.
Okay, good. So every other year we vote for who's going to be in office. Governor, House, Senate, City Council, prosecutor, whatever, right? When we vote on a constitutional amendment, we don't get to vote on that ever again unless the legislature presents the question to us. It's over. We've given that away. And so that is the reason whenever I get a constitutional question that's going to be on the ballot, I start working on it way in advance. I don't wait till the last day because they're hard to understand. They require taking the time to analyze them. So I get the constitutional amendment when it passes the legislature, because that's when you know the language, what the words are.
Mm-hmm.
My initial reaction before I even turn the first page is I'm probably voting no, because I don't want to lose my vote on this issue by putting it in the Constitution. I'd rather have the people that I'm electing know who I am, know how I feel about this issue, and they have to be responsible. I don't want them to take it away from me to have the ability to influence a new way of dealing with it. So that's where I start. And then I read it. And if it doesn't make sense to me, if the legislature shall have the power to reserve marriage to opposite sex couples, if when I read that, I go, what? I'm voting no. I'm just not going to pass it because they're cheating me. They're not being straightforward. They're hiding the ball. And it doesn't have to be that way, except that we vote for them and that's the way they treat us back.
Yep. And I think for me, now what happens is our Office of Elections normally does put out an informational PDF that normally has all the questions. They will try to put in the pros and the cons. So there's a couple of things that we'll be able to get out there to you that we'll be able to put in your hand that will help you to understand. But I think that what we have to do as people of faith is to really understand what amending the Constitution may mean for our future. You know, what does it mean for our kids, and what does it mean for this state? You know, for those of us who are going to live and die here, you know, we want to make sure that everything we do is going to promote faith. It's going to promote family. It's going to promote freedom. And answering yes on a constitutional question could change the course of our religious freedom in this state forever. And like Jim said, it's very, very hard. Not that it's impossible, but it's hard to amend the Constitution. I mean, well, I guess it's not really hard because they can come up with a question, and then if everybody says yes, then it's easily amended. But I think that we have to start paying attention. So in this last minute, I think what Jim and I really want to encourage you to do is please, please, please stay plugged into Hawaii Family Forum so you know what's happening at the state legislature. We're a very small nonprofit, so we don't weigh in on every single bill that comes up. But if it's a bill that affects faith, family, and freedom, you're going to know about it because we do send out information on these bills so that you can see what's happening. And during an election year, Hawaii Family Advocates normally will let you know how candidates vote on an issue. And you want to stay tuned because there's going to be some changes with Hawaii Family Advocates that'll be coming up in a new show. So make sure you stay plugged in, that you like this video, that you share it, that you subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And stay tuned because next week, Jim and I are going to be talking about squatting and what that means.
Not exercising, not those kind.
Yeah, not those kind of squatting. So we'll see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.